Disclaimer. The views and opinions expressed on this podcast are those of the hosts, guests, and callers, and are not necessarily those of SELACO. This show protects the right of free speech and can promote any lifestyle, belief, or any other practice. This show is for education, information, and enlightenment. Listen at your own discretion.
Walk a narrow path to rhythms of these tracks. Be sharp like falling bombs, spitting battle raps. So now I'm talking crap to everybody thinking that I'm whack. Back on the attack, lifting up my hand to smack you down to the ground. Fall upon your knees, begging for forgiveness, please. I'm not a god or a man, I'm a demon with a plan. On a genocide mission, wiping out opposing clans. Fans in the stands, blood in the sands. Slaves with the curse, I'm the master of my universe. I choose to let it go. With every seed that I plant, every harvest that I sow, each row of the ore bringing me ever closer, more better to the center of the earth.
Welcome to SELACO from the Casa. You just heard Shneaky. He's from the city of Huntington Park. He does a lot of hip hop from that city. Right now he's in San Diego. Thank you so much, Shneaky, for donating your music to our podcast. And I am your host, Eztli, from the city of Bell. We have today the producer, the man behind the idea, Christian Caro. We have Frank Cardenas with us too, which is our co-host. We have three special mujeres with us, Dorenyse Díaz, Karla Sanchez, and Araceli Espinoza. All right, so today we're going to do some brief introductions. First, we're going to start off with Dorenyse. Could you just tell the audience that are listening that have never heard you, who you are, real quickly about who you are and where you come from?
Yeah, so my name is Dorenyse Díaz. I'm from the city of Southgate. What else would you like me to share?
Where are your parents from?
My parents are from the beautiful country of Nicaragua, specifically from our town is Eztli.
What's your favorite food from Nicaragua?
Oh, dang. Wow. Honestly, just like my mom's repochetas, which are like little quesadillas kind of thing. They're just a comfort food.
Repochetas. I never have heard of those, but they sound delicious.
You've had them though. Your mom made them last night.
Those
we
are
just make them with queso.
Okay, so I guess they're tacos de papa. Those are repochetas. Really. But you just okay. Okay, all right. Thank you for being on the podcast today, Dorenyse. And next person we're going to do a quick introduction of is Karla Sanchez. Karla, who are you?
Hi, well, I'm Karla. I'm here to talk about self-love, what's self-hate, and how it arises. I'm a student. I'm a musician.
What school do you go to?
I go to Cal State Northridge, and right now I'm studying environmental health and occupational health.
Okay. What bands are you in?
I'm a sax player for a ska band, for two reggae bands called Ronco a Coco and Mano Sucia.
That's dope. Yeah. I grew up watching Rocco Van Coco since I was like 16 years old. Awesome. Thank you for being on the show, Karla. All right, next person, next mujer, Araceli. Could you tell the people listening today who you are, where your parents are from, and where you're going to school now?
Okay, so I'm Araceli. My parents are both from Mexico. My dad was born in Caudillo, Michoacan, and my mom was born in Tijuana. Both crossed as children in 69 and in 77. So I'm a painter at the San Francisco Art Institute, doing a lot of Chicana artwork, I guess you could say. That's the realm that it falls into. And yeah, so I'm just here to share that perspective.
So you've been going to San Francisco State for how long?
San Francisco Art Institute.
San Francisco Art Institute. Mm-hmm. August. And you are here for the weekend and you made it to the podcast. Awesome. Thank you so much for being on today. And the first segment I wanted to talk about is a special segment we chose for today. And I actually posted this on Facebook like 30 minutes ago. This is grassroots, baby. Don't judge me. This is like from the bottom, you know. I wanted to do this segment last night at Alivio Open Mic. For those of you that don't know, SELACO stands for Southeast LA Collective, and we host an open mic called Alivio Open Mic from my very own home, my garage. And last night it was a really special event. A lot of people showed up, and we all took different roles in the Southeast LA Collective in organizing this event. And we actually had the crew of One Day on Earth film for the event. They captured the immigrant and Latino experience from midnight to around 1:30 a.m. So it was a very long open mic. Frank, you got anything to say about that? How'd you feel last night?
I was just so thrilled to see it because we weren't just part of One Day in LA, but we were part of a special segment that they did specifically focusing on immigration and the immigration issue here in Los Angeles. So being a part of that space, you know, it was a combined effort between Alivio and SELACO and One Day in LA, and seeing all these people working towards putting these voices and these experiences out there in, you know, in a big way was really wonderful to see, and it was amazing to hear people's stories.
Yeah, it really was. I was really touched by a lot of the people that went on the mic during that special segment for One Day on Earth. Especially like even our guest Dorenyse, she had her aunt there, and I know she was saying her story on that, and it was awesome to see the age range too. So thank you to Dorenyse for inviting your tia on there. And we also had Karla go up during that segment, and Araceli. Actually, everyone in this, well, the three mujeres went on during that segment. But today, I kind of bounced around. You're going to have to edit this. The special segment for today was You Know You're Privileged When. So I posted this a few minutes ago on Facebook, and I realized that a lot of people don't really know what privilege means. There was one person that wrote, you are happy as a privilege, and personally I don't believe that's a privilege. I believe that's a state of mind. There's people that are from rural areas that suffer to get 3 meals a day, but they're actually genuinely happy because they have their families around them and they have a sense of community. So I don't really think being happy is a privilege, but I think privilege is something you are either like born with, something out of your control, maybe like you're raised into, like maybe you have your 5 senses. Dorenyse, do you have anything to say about what privilege is?
Sure. So I think privilege is something both static and also fluid at the same time. It's something that is associated with our race, our ability, our gender, our perceived gender as well. I think it has a lot of intersections within that, but I think privilege is something that a lot of us have. Some of us have a little more than others, and that I think it's important to recognize and talk about as often as possible, not just so we can feel guilty about it, but so that we can understand how to use it and how to make sure that we decenter it in many spaces.
Thank you. That was the key right there, the word guilty. I definitely bring up privileges not to make people feel guilty, but to make people humble and understand other people's perspectives, you know? So I acknowledge my privileges. First, I'm a man. I have male privilege. Second, I was born here in the United States. Unlike my parents that had to suffer to come over here, that's a privilege, me being born here. I did not have to literally work 2 jobs while going to college. So I believe that was a privilege of mine too, not being able to have to like juggle multiple jobs, you know? So Karla, could you like touch on what privilege is, or maybe pinpoint like 1 or 2 of your privileges?
I think one of my most obvious ones is my skin tone. Although I do come from like Mexican descent, my skin tone is lighter, and that is one of my privileges I'm able to like go off with. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that, you know what, that skin tone is definitely a privilege too, because I see it in Mexico. When you go to Mexico, you definitely see how the darker skinned Mexicanos, the one that look more indigenous, are like, they're worse off. Like the state or the people discriminate them much more, and you see it in telenovelas and in media. Like they always have the stereotypical roles of like the cleaner, or like she's never like the beautiful woman in charge, you know, like, so I think that's definitely a privilege. Thank you, Karla. Araceli, do you have any privileges that you want to touch on?
Yeah, I was definitely privileged by being able to go to private school K through 12. So that was a choice my parents did for my sisters and and I actually had no choice in it as much as I wanted to go to public school. So like that was a definite privilege, and I was able to have the resources to go to college, and it never feeling like my counselors weren't there to help me, because I always had support. And especially being in an all women's school, all female school, like telling girls every day to like to be all that you can be was like extremely powerful. So
Yeah,
that's a privilege.
that's a definite privilege. And so you were in an all-girl, like, Catholic school?
Yeah.
Hey, things go crazy there. I mean,
Have you been? No.
I've been to, like,
I'm just kidding,
I
I'm just
hung
kidding.
around some Catholic. I don't know, like, they kind of fit the stereotype one time, but I'm not gonna judge. It was cool though. So anyways, I don't want to get too off topic, but those are some privileges on the special segment. I wanted to do like a round of, like, maybe like each one of us go like clockwise, like, you know, you're privileged when, and then you say, like, you finish off the sentence or like say a word or two. So we'll go counterclockwise. So I'm gonna start the sentence, you know, you're privileged when, and I'm gonna finish it, then you're gonna go, then the rest of you. So we're gonna do like one spin around. So you know you're privileged when you're a heterosexual male. So Frank.
You know you're privileged when you don't understand somebody else's experience.
You know you're privileged when you get to walk down the street and no one assumes your body is up for grabs, or you're up to no good.
You know you're privileged when you can pay for college.
You know you're privileged when you've been to museums as a child.
Awesome. Thank you. Museums, definitely. I've been to a few. I never got to go to LACMA though until I was like 20. All right, so today the main topics we're going to talk about is self-love, the importance of self-love for women with a Y, and young girls. Many times we are told how to be, how to act, how to dress, what to say, what not to say, but we are never taught how to follow our hearts. These are words from Karla Sanchez. She also said our self-hate grows through different things: media, childhood, trauma, and society. We need to awaken the self-love. So this is a topic that I find extremely important because I work with a lot of young girls too in school, and I see the discrimination that they hold upon themselves. Not just guys calling girls sluts, but it's a lot of like little girls calling each other sluts, and it's really sad. So Karla, do you just talk from the heart? What do you have to say about this topic? And we're gonna bounce off each other right now.
All right. Well, I mean, definitely as a woman, I have experienced my own self-hate. You know, it's difficult growing up in a household where it's mainly men. I have 2 older brothers, and my father's like the typical Mexicano patriarchal father. I'm the head of the household kind of thing. So it was very like, he was always like, you have to be in the kitchen con tu mamá. Like, you have to do this, this, and that. You can't be with us. It was very like, there was segregation in my own household based on sex. So that definitely led me to hate myself. Like, why can't I be like them? Why can't I do this? I felt very disempowered. So like, self-love is a process too, you know? It's a very hard process, and one thing I've learned is that digression is also part of that process, and it's okay to digress.
What do you mean by, like, could you elaborate on digression?
I guess through my experience, you know, self-love is a journey, you know. It's a very difficult journey, especially when there's so many different factors being thrown at you, telling you that you can't love yourself, telling you to be this way. So many times you feel empowered, you know? You feel like, yeah, you know, I'm the fucking shit. Like, I'm beautiful. I'm this amazing person. And then somebody comes and tells you, you're this, you're that, you're fat, you're ugly, you can't do that, you're a girl. And, like, of course you digress. You're like, oh, well, you know, maybe he or she is right. But that's also a process, you know? That's something that you have to take as a learning experience. And, like, one of my friends told me this because I remember I was having, like, a breakdown of, like, I was just feeling really shitty. And I was like, I can't believe I'm digressing. I thought I was healing. Like, I thought I was doing so good. And she was telling me, you know what? That's a process of your journey. You have to digress in order to learn. And I think that's something important that we should acknowledge. It's okay to digress as long as we learn.
So it's definitely needed for like our human development to digress.
Yeah.
So you're explaining how things were in your house, that things were like segregated based on your gender, your sex. Like,
Yeah.
so like your mom and you, maybe you had to be in the kitchen while los hombres were watching soccer and they were waiting for you to cook the food and you to clean the plates after.
Yeah.
And as me, as a male, like I always saw that growing up in my abuelita's house, like all the time. Like the guys don't touch anything, they just go eat, and the women do the serving. And I always wondered how it was in other households. And I know like the Mexican culture can be extremely machista.
Yeah.
But I'd like to hear from you, Dorenyse. Is the like Nicaraguan culture like this? How was it in your house growing up?
Well, I was raised in a single parent home. Although my dad was really present in my life, my dad is actually pretty radical. He was really involved in the Sandinista movement in Nicaragua. And although within the movement there was a lot of factions of discrimination specifically towards women, or really a lot of the usage of women as just sexual objects during the revolution, my dad is pretty much a pretty forward thinker. But I think a lot of times it kind of comes from maybe him having strong theory, but not really knowing what that looks like in real life. But my mom's a chingona, so she really didn't take shit from anybody. We had, she was married multiple times, and every time there was some form of disrespect, there was no question. It was just like, nope, get the fuck out. So I wouldn't say that this is like typical in Nicaraguan culture. I think a lot of it differs by how politicized your parents are, also just like how much access they've had. Not just to theory, but to seeing examples of what, like how this could look differently.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, theory is awesome, but it's very flat if you never see it done in real life or you never see that action. So speaking of like dynamics between gender and household, how were things in your house, Araceli, between the genders in your house?
In my household, it was actually kind of very different from the typical machismo mindset. It's one guy, my dad, and all these very strong mujeres in our household. So, like,
he couldn't overpower
no,
you.
he couldn't. No, can't overpower at all. But it was interesting because I did grow up in a family, like on his side, where his brothers and my cousins, it's very male dominated on that side. So, I did see a lot of truth in. My grandma was the last one to eat. All the meals were served first. I, of course, and my sisters rarely ever served my dad. So, like, my grandma ended up taking up that role, and he would serve us. So, I purposely tried to change those roles in, challenging my uncles and stuff. But they're like, no, mija, you have to do it because you're a woman. Like, that's your role. And I'm like, no. But it's very different on my mom's side, where it's like all female dominant, and they're all really strong Mexican women, teachers and entrepreneurs and stuff, and can really hold their own. So
I think it's interesting that even within this room there's been so many different experiences, because I too, growing up with my tias and stuff, even though they realized that this was something different, that they didn't necessarily have to serve the males, they appreciated it as their role. And even though they worked 2 jobs, and my uncles worked as well, and you'd go over for dinner and they would still be cooking and doing all that, but they didn't see it all the time as a burden. And when I got older and realized what was going on, I would go and try to help and try to do the dishes or clean up, or be like, no, yeah, it's fine, I'm going to serve myself. Like, it was almost offensive because that was their domain, and that was what they saw as their responsibility. So I was just wondering what you guys think is non-traditional mujeres about that kind of perspective and that traditional role.
I think, like, traditional roles, can be broken down, and a lot of women, people don't know that. People ignore the fact that, like, Mexican mujeres are actually very strong-willed, or like Latina mujeres, and they can stand their own on their own 2 feet, like no man needed, and very super chingonas and stuff. So I think that is a traditional role, to be a strong mujer as a Latina. I don't think that's breaking any of it. like household gender roles, like again, everything's been very diverse. I just think that within the culture, we should be teaching each other how to cultivate as we once did, and learn to, cook for yourself, for your families out of love, and like taking turns and learning just how to survive, not, just to survive.
I think it's really interesting because my parents are actually in the process of divorce, and before that, my mom was like that typical, like, that she was in that traditional role, like the voy a servir, I'll be the last one to eat. But as soon as like my dad left when I was 13, she changed a lot. It was very like she became more empowered almost. She's like, yo no te voy a servir a ti. You have to make your own food. Like, I'll make your food, but if you're not gonna eat that, too bad. And like, she became very spicy, you know. Like, it was really awesome to see her empowered. Like, even though sometimes it'd be really frustrating. Like, I saw my mother get empowered, even without a man by her side, which was really empowering for me.
So it kind of needed like the extraction of like that male suppression or like oppression that was going on for her to empower herself.
That also goes back to self-love. She didn't need him there to feel like she needed to be empowered, and she definitely used that as a growing experience. And I've seen my mom digress through that, like through the separation. I saw her like cry so many times. But even then, like, she grew out of it, and like she grew into this person where she was happy to be alone, where she was comfortable being with herself and not having somebody by her side. And that's like really inspiring for me as a daughter, because it's like, damn, if she could do that, like I could do so much more.
Hell yeah, definitely. Dorenyse, did you want to say something?
Yeah, for sure. Something that you said, Frank, really struck a chord for me. So it's like the roles that women kind of either put themselves in, assign themselves to, or are assigned to them. I think there's a lot of power in being able to have choice, and also not being able to, like, not outwardly saying, oh, I don't wash dishes or I don't cook because that's what's done for women or whatever. And I think I saw examples of that in my home. So even though my mom was the only one really working at our house, Martita, if you all were there yesterday, my tia, she played pretty much a pretty big traditional role, if you want to look at it that way. She would cook for us, pick us up from school, make sure that all of our stuff was done. And my mom was the one who would work around 2 or 3 jobs, and would come back really late. And we were all expected to like serve my mom and wait on her because of how hard she's been working throughout the day. And I think when I saw that type of collaboration, it wasn't so much of like, this is what's expected of Martita or this is what's expected of my mom, but it was more so like, this is how we appreciate and how we stand up for each other and how we collectively provide for this home.
I really love that, because I don't think in at least the generation that we've all grown up in, that it's necessarily just whatever roles are assigned to you, but it's appreciating the role you wish to play, and it's taking ownership of that, and whether it's a traditional role or a non-traditional role, really owning it and making it your own and being appreciative of your own contribution does a lot for your own empowerment, your own self-esteem, as well as those around you, because they see you. It's not like you're unhappy just because you have to wash dishes or you have to make food. They see you being happy because you have the skills and the privilege of being able to cook food that you have to serve to your family, and the nourishment comes from you and enjoying that role. Araceli?
I mean, just talking about empowerment and self-love also, like, my dad was the kind of person that always told my sisters and I that you could do anything that you want, so even if it wasn't a traditional role, even if it isn't like what he expects of us, if it were up to him, I'd either be a nun or a politician. Not going to art school and like having this living of instability. Like, he would, hope that I had a stable lifestyle, but he still supports me wholeheartedly. So
that's awesome. That's great. So personally, in my experience, like now that we're talking about basically patriarchy in the household and the roles that men and women take, I grew up seeing like my tios from my dad's side like being extremely machista. Like, they would never touch a plate unless it had the tortilla on it already. Like, they would never do anything. They would even condescend my dad for washing dishes, they would condescend my dad for cleaning the kitchen. And my dad got hurt a few years ago, so he had a lot of spare time. So he's like, of course, I'm going to take it upon myself. I'm at home. I can't work. I'm going to clean the kitchen. I'm going to do what I got to do at the house. But, like, it was crazy seeing my dad condescended by my tios just because he was a male cleaning the house. And that's something human. Like, you clean where you live. You don't want to be somewhere, like, filthy. Like, that's human. Like, you cook. Humans cook. It doesn't have to be like, I don't know, this machismo, like, it just really makes me sick. So, and like, my future, when I have a home and when I have my own kitchen, like, I definitely want to raise my future children seeing like a balance, like, between males and females, starting in the kitchen, starting in the household, like, cooking for each other, cooking together. Like, hey, you cooked, I'll wash the dishes, or, you know, it's like equal. But I think that's how, like, this self-hatred starts growing inside of young women, and this suppression by little boys starts happening because they see these inequalities in their household that they can articulate, and they take this outside to the streets, and then they believe that this is how it has to be. So I think it's great hearing all of your perspectives and your stories, but about, like, the household environment. But now let's talk a little bit about, like, media and how media can really devalue, like, a young girl's self-worth and her self-love. Like, media as in advertising, as in film and TV. Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Just to quickly start, I really want to recommend to you guys and all you people listening. It's a song by Lupe Fiasco called "Bitch Bad." I don't know if any of you guys have heard it, and I really love it.
Bitch bad, woman
yeah.
good.
No, I'm so bad at this whole like music thing.
Yeah. No, but it's really wonderful because it's a positive rap song, and he's kind of a positive artist in general. But the message is, bitch bad, woman good, lady better. And I think that really speaks a lot to sort of the state of our pop culture right now. It's like, oh, I'm a bad bitch, not I'm a powerful woman, not, you know, oh, I'm an established lady. I'm not, you know, assessing my self-worth in that respect. They're just they're assessing it with negativity as a positive thing, and that can really mess with their minds. So, Karla?
I mean, I guess the overall message of that song, it's pretty cool. But I guess we should also look at the terms, like lady. What exactly is it? What is a lady? What characteristics squander that? Is it a white female who's like in this upper class? Like, what is that? So it's like, I for one do not like the term. So that's me.
Yeah, I think it's really weird, like, the way I hear some guys try to raise up women, or like it's like you're trying to put them on a pedestal. Like, we don't want them on a pedestal. We want them on the ground, like on the dirt with us. Like, all right, what do you have to say?
Sure. So that made me think of a song, if y'all have ever heard of this wonderful rapper. His name's Bamboo. And he talks specifically about he's actually from the Bay, so you should really look him up. He's always up there.
I will.
And one of the songs that he talks about, he says, I'm not going to call a woman a queen, I'm going to call you a soldier, because you'd be just as bad to grab a fucking gun and shoot me if I acted up, right?
Yeah.
But also talking about the danger of, I guess, putting women up on a pedestal, because it makes us so immaculate that if we fall, there's no grace, and there's no actual humanization of the way that we're viewing our women. I really love that. So, like, I don't call you queen, I call you a soldier.
Comrade, what's up? All right, well, you have something to say, Araceli?
Yeah, I think a lot of the times also, though, when we compare or empower women through terms like soldier, or like that usually have to do with like masculinity, or terms that are usually geared towards men, I think we should also try to remove that from us, because we're not men, right? And so I think we should use or appropriate terms that are going to empower women. And so, like, you know, instead of saying a soldier, you can say you're
Warrior.
a warrior, like an Amazon. You know, you're an Amazon warrior.
Xena.
Yeah, she's not an Amazon warrior, but you get the gist. Yeah, you know what I mean? So I think that's something important also.
And this is exactly where I wanted to go with it, because as a male, it's kind of a double-edged sword, because you want to make sure that you convey the appreciation and respect you have for a female, but which terms do you use? Because growing up, lady for me was a good thing. It was, it was your mom. It was somebody established and esteemed and respected. But I also understand, Karla, your point about, there's a colonization of certain terms. And I mean, we're using an imperialist language in the first place. So the connotations that are kind of inherited with that can be seen as negative. So is it more empowering as, a bad bitch, because that's what you identify as, if that's what you're owning? Or is it, better as a lady, which is something you see as like, oh, that's a privileged woman who doesn't have to work or whatever? What terms are the ones that we should use?
I think that also has to do with a lot of agency that particular woman or mujer has. So I think she should define herself, and once she's learned to define herself and she realizes what these words do mean and how she can relate to them or not relate to them, she should let others know how to address her or how she addresses herself, because that's her agency, and each mujer has had different experiences. And we're empowered each differently.
Yeah, definitely. So through media, we have built these this this language like bad bitch, and like it's gotten really popular in hip hop, and like Bad Girls Club. I'm a bad bitch. I'm a bad bitch. I'm powerful, bad bitch. So like you hear women do this in media, and I think, what does that do like to young girls? Like, do they feel like, oh, this is like a bad bitch? Is that what I want to be? Like, I want to be like. So like, I'm just thinking how these words, like this music, these TV shows influence like young girls, like to want to fit this mold. Yet that mold is not something that's gonna get them like really respect, to be honest, from their male counterparts. So do any of you have anything to say about that, like the way media influences like young girls, like in ads or like these TV shows, and how they think they're gonna aspire to be, powerful like that, but really like those guys calling them bad bitches ain't really gonna respect them that much.
It's really difficult, because I know a lot of mujeres that take the term bitch as empowering, and like, that's cool, that's your experience. Personally, I'd rather not use the term, and it's also difficult for like young women, like, because their minds are still like sponges and they're still like taking everything in. So it's like hard, like, what do we want to teach them? What do we want to let them know? And especially when media is like telling them, especially young women of color, telling them you have to be this skin tone, your hair has to be this light, your eyes have to be this light. Like, it's very hard. Like, how does that create self-love when so many things around you are telling you don't be you?
Yeah, basically. And let's remember, like, most media, most ads, most of these TV shows, films are dominated by what? Male white men, right? Most were you gonna say?
I think that's a good point, and even in the modern media landscape, it's not even so much white males anymore. I mean, there's males of color and females that are getting into management positions and as producers and directors and stuff. And it's not so much, at least in my opinion, the perspective that's being pushed down as much as it is the commercialism that's being put down, because all this serves a purpose. And if you have somebody that looks like, just a regular person, a little thicker, dark hair, dark eyes, whatever, there is money to be made there. Because if you need your skin to be lighter, you need lotions. If you want your hair to be lighter, you need bleaches and dyes. If you want your eyes to be lighter, you need contacts, you need makeup. And this is all consumerism. And I know it's a little off topic, but bringing in, that consumerist interest is what drives a lot of this, because it isn't so much about the beauty of the individual person, but it's about what you can sell to them to make them think that they're beautiful.
Okay.
You know, and that goes back to self-love. They're making money out of your insecurities. And
Yeah.
it's like, it's not just society's fault. It's also you. You have to be able to choose. I mean, that's also difficult because there's so many things being thrown at you. It's difficult to know what to choose. But it's like, you have to have enough like heart to know what you want, to know who you are, to know that, well, fuck it, my skin is dark, I'm beautiful. Brown is beautiful.
Sure, I think one of the things that made me think of when you were talking about consumerism, specific, I can't even say that word. Específicamente, is using brown, black, and also our AAPI brothers and sisters' bodies as props, right?
Yeah.
And using them as products, as examples of exoticism, right? So like when I think about, for example, Lupita Nyong'o, who just won an Oscar, people looking at her beauty and being like, yeah, that's beautiful. It's both empowering to a lot of girls that share her same hue, but it's also for a lot of, this is just my opinion, from a lot of like white women that I've seen interact with that, being able to associate that with something exotic, something rare, something that's never before been seen, even though the majority of women in this world actually look a lot more like her than they look like, Cameron Diaz or gente like that. So
Yeah, stop using the word exotic too for for people of color. We're not animals from like a jungle.
Right. Also, like, there's hypersexualization of women. And I think that's something that young girls do pick up on quickly. I know I did. And I even carry it within my own character, like putting on makeup and like spending like 20-30 minutes to put on my face. And then also like being aware of my sexualization, even though I don't have like the specific curves of what it means to be like Latina, and I don't have the body type of what it means to be white either. So just trying to like redefine myself. And when you take agency over your own sexuality and over yourself, then like people are afraid of that, and people don't really know how to handle you in that sense.
So I just want to take a second to speak a little bit about a term that we've been using a lot, and that's agency. So for those who don't know or aren't familiar with it, what is agency?
I just want to like start off with my definition of agency. I think it's ownership in your identity. So yeah, I think agency is synonymous or like equal to having ownership of who you are.
To me, agency basically means like your voice, your ability to empower yourself through your actions. So let's say a poor person of color, a homeless person, they don't have much agency. They don't really have any agency because they're homeless, they're of color, they don't get the meals they need to live, to be healthy, so they have very, very little agency. And then to me, like a person with a bunch of agency is like a CEO of some corporation that has like a bunch of agency. They can buy off politicians and they can pass all these laws to benefit their corporation. So that's the way I describe agency to myself.
Since we're going in counterclockwise fashion, even though you guys can't see it, I guess agency for me is taking a hold of your own power and realizing what you're capable of and using your own resources, whatever they may be, which is kind of what you're talking about, Eric, the fluctuations in agency, because you're able to do certain things if you have certain privileges, and agency is, realizing that and using it, whether for positive or for negative, but that's your decision.
Sure. So when I think of agency, it often makes me think of students, of young people, and I think I associate it with being critical consumers of knowledge and also critical consumers of information in the world, right? So when people are projecting certain things that you should be doing or you should be saying, being able to say, well, all right, I can reclaim this term if I feel like it, or I can choose to be something completely different, all while becoming more and more truly myself.
I think agency is definitely about empowering yourself and making the choices that you want to, and not just allowing outside sources to determine what you should do with yourself and other things.
So agency is a great way to bridge the gap from what we were talking about in media and being able to accept the messages you want for yourself or reject the ones that you don't. And one of our next topics, which is trauma and how taking agency over yourself and your own choices and the things you can change is part of the healing process for a lot of young people, especially young women that have been traumatized simply by being alive in this society, and realizing that it doesn't have to be the way that people tell them that it is, and that they can change those definitions and change those decisions for themselves. So, Karla?
I guess all I can really offer is my experience right now, because that's all I really have.
That's
I
good.
I grew up in a household that was very violent and very filled with vices, alcoholism. My father used to abuse my mother and me and my brothers. So, that was very definitely traumatic. He was definitely portraying his past experiences from his father onto us. And, that's a cycle that definitely has to be broken, but that's a different topic. And, like, the abuse that I received and that I saw my mom receive, that definitely made me see myself in a different way, For so long, I had so much anger, so much, like, resentment. And that's also something that you need to learn to let go when you're trying to love yourself, because you have to. That's like, it's really important. Like, I don't know how much more to say it.
That is extremely important. Letting go of like all that hate, because the hate ends up like burning you
Yeah.
too. But like you said that breaking the chain of violence is like another topic. It kind of is, but also that goes along with agency and self-love.
Yeah.
Because if you love yourself, you're not gonna want to perpetrate that violence onto like your future children, and you're gonna use your agency to empower your future children. Do you have any?
Yeah, like, definitely for a long time, I was victimizing myself. I became very, like, fuck, I deserve this shit. Like, what did I do? And, like, it clicked in time. With time, everything heals. But it finally clicked for me, and I was just like, well, why am I victimizing myself? Like, I need to use this to empower myself, use my experience to be able to speak up about it, to help others. And, like, that's how I took agency. I stopped being a victim, and I started loving myself.
Awesome. That's so beautiful. That's how self-love works, It doesn't happen overnight, and it's
No.
not an easy journey, but it takes reflection, and it takes definitely using your experiences as a motivating factor to want to make a difference in the lives of other people that are probably going through what you've gone through.
Yeah.
Did you want to share anything on that? How childhood trauma affects self-love, and how childhood trauma is a burden for many, especially for many young women that grow up in homes with like in machista homes, that suffer the consequences of violence, of a lineage of violence. Because I've seen that perpetrated in my own home too. My dad was an alcoholic, and he was like very angry all the time, and now he's definitely changed. But I think when kids see this, they tend to act out. Like and especially young girls, like little boys, males, in turn externalize pain. So when you hurt a boy is more likely to hurt you back. Or if you hurt a man, if a man feels pain, he's more likely to externalize his pain and go beat people. Women internalize their pain. So that's why I think you were saying that you were sort of internalizing, saying that maybe you deserve this, and you were saying those words.
Yeah.
So that's internalizing.
And, like, definitely what you said about boys, I definitely saw that with my brothers. Some people even go to addiction. My brother, he went to drugs, and, like, that was definitely a product of his own self-hate. Because I've talked to him about this, and I'm like, well, you don't love yourself, you don't you don't have the respect for yourself, for your body, and you keep doing this. And one thing that he told me was, well, people see me this way either way. They see me as a drug addict. I might as well be it. And like, that's where you have to take agency again. Like, you should not let that image be who you are. Like, you should be able to have the power to say who you are, and like, stop victimizing yourself. And like, yeah, Araceli.
Yeah, I can relate to, I guess, your brother's mentality of saying, like, this is who I am. This is how people perceive me, so this is who I am. Although it doesn't have to do necessarily with childhood trauma, but most with my recent, I guess, appearance, I have a sleeve, like a tattooed sleeve, and so it's not the norm or traditional for a mujer to have tattoos, and you're not my mom's told me, you don't love yourself, you don't respect your body because you're writing on yourself and you're causing pain to yourself. And like, yo, mom, like, I don't, this is the way I want to look. I'm having agency over my body. That's how I'm doing, or that's how I'm expressing myself visually. And so that's just a continuous struggle as well, like just with body art and things like that within, I think, the Mexican culture, especially with immigrant parents and things like that. I think that's something to talk about as well, especially as the beginning of our origins as indigenous people or like natives to the land, that we did have body art and all that stuff. So that is more traditional than our current European mindset.
And part of what you were talking about was taking agency over that and saying, hey, just because I have these, that doesn't make me what everybody else thinks I am. And doing that as a female and as a mujer, is that part of the mujerismo mentality, or is it something different?
Or what is mujerismo? Now that you said that word, Frank, I barely heard this word like 5 days ago. So what is mujerismo, Dorenyse?
Sure, so I'll go ahead and talk a lot about it. If you look it up, there's a lot of controversy on the internet about what mujerismo is, but I can tell you what my personal journey with mujerismo has been. I was, I think, a sophomore in college, and I started studying liberation theology in college, and I came across some texts that really, really changed my life and changed just how I viewed myself and how I viewed myself within, like, faith. And it was written by, her name was Dorenyse Díaz. And I don't know if she coined a term, or I'm not going to go back and like be super ahistorical about this, but I saw her use it in a way that made so much sense to me. And it was a way to decipher the difference between talking about feminism and having that immediately be associated with white feminism, with fighting for particular things that, although relevant to many women in society, are not as relevant to women of color specifically, that are dealing a lot with racial violence towards us and towards our communities as well. And so when I started reading a lot about mujerista theology specifically, it was something that made me see not just myself written within the word, but also people that look like me being able to, I guess, experience forms of liberation that were very, very distinct.
So it sounds to me like, from what you just said, that mujerismo is more like feminism for women of color. Am I getting that right?
So there's a particular branch of I don't know if it's a branch of feminism, but it's called womanism as well. And that's something that came out of our sisters that identify as Black or as African American specifically. So you'll find theory there, a lot of it written by Bell Hooks and folks like that are talking about that. And it comes from just the concept of I am a woman as well. And so similarly with mujerismo, it kind of came out of women trying to be in these circles surrounded by a lot of white women that were fighting for very particular things for themselves, and them not finding themselves within the lines of what was being written and what was being announced as like the justice cause of the time.
Could we say that mujerismo is like a way to challenge like machismo?
Definitely. So with all of these terms, language is incredibly fluid. So if you feel like mujerismo is not your thing and feminismo is your thing, that's cool. It's up to you as far as like what you claim specifically. But mujerismo specifically to talk about how Latinas, how Chicanas, how women of color specifically from Latin American countries can fight back against all the forces of oppression, including the colonization of our minds and of our spaces, as well as the treatment of our families and our communities and the machismo that we experience in ourselves. So we think about the wonderful Gloria Anzaldúa specifically, questioning the stuff that happens within our homes, as well as the things that are being pushed upon us by society. I sometimes find myself talking only about white culture and white supremacy culture specifically. I mean, like, look at all these things that white people do and blah, 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 not realizing that there are oppressive forces that have internalized our homes, have internalized our spirits in many ways, and there's healing in being able to name that stuff while also healing our comunidades.
Damn. There, you don't even need to read a book anymore about Mujerismo.
Please read books.
No, I'm joking. Yes, you should read the books. So you mentioned Gloria. How do we pronounce it? Andaluza?
Anzaldúa?
Anzaldúa. So would we say she writes about, I know she writes about feminism, but could we say that kind of goes under Mujerismo?
It doesn't have to.
It doesn't have to?
Yeah.
So you said it's fluid.
Yeah.
Okay, because I was online and I saw this debate about Mujerismo and what it is and what it's not. Some people were saying it's not feminism. Some people were saying that it is feminism for women of color. And I definitely understand the need to have that distinction between feminism and like feminism for women of color, because recently I went to Santa Cruz, California, where my girlfriend stays, and I went to her college, and I was in some of the classes in sociology, and I definitely see a big difference between the white students that are in the sociology classes and the students of color in the sociology classes. I definitely see like the apathy that I saw, because I was actually in the classes. They're on the phone while we're talking about oppression of people of color by white people. So to them it's like, damn, you're just like blaming us. I'm like, I'm sorry, that's historical fact though. Your ancestors did a lot of damage. So it's definitely like they have like a lot of privileges that don't let them see past the need to have these distinctions between feminism and like for feminism for women of color.
Yeah, I just want to touch on base with my experiences at the San Francisco Art Institute. I have no professors that are women of color, or at least Latina. I have had a couple of Iranian teachers, but most of my teachers have been white, for the exception of those two women. So it's really hard for not only the students, which is also a predominantly white campus. It's the first time I've ever been in a space where I don't feel included, where I actually really feel like a minority for the first time in my life. And so I just kind of like pose the question, where are all the colored mujeres in our art institutes, our art history classes, our pinturas, we need to know who they are, so the women who are going to school right now have someone to look up to, and when we do critiques, that they can really critique our culture and how we're trying to portray it through our artwork and visually through that, so we can tell our stories correctly, and not just be told like, oh, that looks good, that's a good technique, maybe you should try this technique, and that's all I get from my teachers.
Damn, Frank, I saw you wanted to say something.
So, Araceli, that's kind of back to agency and back to our last podcast, too, about narratives. If our culture is out there and they see all these different things being pushed on them, at home, at school, from billboards and TV and media and stuff, and they don't recognize their own story in that, they're really kind of just left with what's out there, and I think that also lends itself to the trauma that happens, because if you don't see yourself anywhere and people are telling you all these negative things, then that's all you have. And so what is it in Mujerismo that helps fight against that? What's the intersection between Mujerismo and art and agency?
I particularly will not use the term mujerismo, just because I barely learned the term yesterday, so I don't have full knowledge or any ownership on that term. So I would identify my theology as a Chicana feminist. So just a lot of readings about that, looking at Chicana artists, They're very empowering to me, and I've basically gone out of my realm of just learning about European males, and I wanted to look at the artwork of women of color and how their brushstrokes work. What colors are they using? What stories are they telling? And how can I contribute to that conversation?
And I think it's an important conversation to have. So what are some of the artists that you have looked at and you have admired in your pursuit?
Definitely Colombian painter Deborah Arango. She's an amazing painter who talked about prostitution through her paintings in Colombia and about protest in Colombia. The government did shut down a couple of her shows even before they opened, so I think she's extremely radical. I have looked into the art group ASCO that came out in the late 1970s, early 80s, who took it upon themselves to bring artwork to the streets of Boyle Heights and East Los, and basically graffitiing on the LACMA because they didn't show Chicano artwork, and then however many years down the line, LACMA has an ASCO show. So how that goes full circle, and those are some of the people I've looked into, and I can't think of other artists off the top of my head, but if you're really interested into other like Chicano artists, you might want to like look up Cheech Marin's Chicano art collection. He has a lot of artists in his collection and his books that he talks about.
Thank you. I think it's important to tell our story and to find those stories out there, because they are out there, and the problem is they're not in schools and they're not being taught to our kids and they're not being presented. And so if we can present that to our listeners, I think we're doing our job here.
Yeah, and all these topics and talking points about Mujerismo, agency, and empowerment for women of color really go along with our next topic, which is going to talk about critical pedagogy. So critical pedagogy, many people listening probably don't know what that is. The people in education most likely do know what it is. Pedagogy is, to me, it's the best way to teach a nation of young minds. Critical pedagogy teaches students about their place in this world and in this earth, this society. So it doesn't only have to do with teaching students how to write an essay or how to do grammar or how to solve some math problems. It teaches children how to change things in their communities. So to me, it's like the most radical form to go, the most radical way to pursue education and to pursue teaching students. Dorenyse, I know you've had experiences with critical pedagogy. Do you want to like give your like summary on what it is?
Sure. So when I think of critical pedagogy, it's something that encompasses completely different factions once it's in particular communities and in particular classrooms. So critical pedagogy, if you look at it here versus in Brazil versus in Nicaragua or whatever, it's going to look differently because the reasons that we're trying to empower our students there are very diverse. So when I think about critical pedagogy, I think again of creating and developing critical consumers of knowledge. Students that are always at a place where they can question not just their educators, but educators all over the place, not just the one that is employed as an educator in front of their classroom, to say, why are there no stories that match my background? Why isn't there theory that matches who I am? Why aren't there artists that look like me, feel like me, express things that are very real about who I am? And a lot of it has to do with being able to teach our students to read and write the world, like really be able to look at all of these different things and say to themselves, I am the owner of my knowledge, and I'm also the person who is going to be able to question where knowledge really comes from. And I often hear these conversations like kind of intertwined with like, I come with critical pedagogy and I'm trying to, have students of color understand who they are and have literature that matches their background, but all basically for the sake to have them navigate dominant culture ultimately, right? So like, I'm gonna have a book that shares a little bit about yourself. I'm gonna bring some Gary Soto, and then you should feel really good about yourself or like celebrate your culture for like a week, and then we move on, and you're gonna learn about real stuff like Shakespeare and all these other white scientists that have made theory overall while the rest of the people of color were sleeping. And so when I think about critical pedagogy, what was most empowering for me was being able to have educators that surrounded me not only with examples of greatness, but with the diversity of that greatness. That it wasn't just one Chicano, it wasn't just one Latino, it was so many that I never felt like I was inferior. Like I never felt like I was at a lack of like, oh, I can only think of one person and it's Selena. And that's like the one Latina that I think of, right? Or the one Chicana. And so I think that's one of the things that's really beautiful about this, that it's different in every space. And critical pedagogy is going to continue to evolve as our students kind of take it and make it their own.
Awesome. So now that you sort of summarize what critical pedagogy is, who in this room or who in the audience listening right now can actually say, hey, in elementary, in middle school, in high school, my teacher taught me with critical pedagogy? Like, who can actually say that your teacher taught you how to change something in your community, to mobilize, to organize, to challenge an inequality that was happening? So for the listeners, try to go back into your educational history and think about your teachers. Think about if they taught you in certain ways how to make a difference in your actual world, with the world that you are in your place in society. Honestly, for me, no teacher taught me through critical pedagogy. Teaching through critical pedagogy is extremely hard now because of like state standards. I think teachers are extremely constricted. They need to teach to the test, standardized testing. You need to memorize this to answer this in this multiple choice test. That is the most important thing, because if you fail it, I'm gonna get fired. I feel like teachers are so constricted now that it's hard to teach critical pedagogy. And I started learning about critical pedagogy through Paulo Freire, and I like learned certain terms like functional literacy versus critical literacy. And I had to write a paper once, and I wrote it on the Nicaraguan revolution, the literacy revolutions in Nicaragua and in Cuba. And what I learned is that in the United States, we value functional literacy. Functional literacy means the ability to write and to read, and that's pretty much it. And critical literacy under critical pedagogy means to basically write, read, but be able to criticize where you're getting your information, to criticize the power structure and the status quo, and for the people that are marginalized to understand why they are marginalized. So critical literacy is, to me, a very powerful tool, and it's a powerful tool that I feel the elite really won't want teachers to teach, honestly. Do you have anything to say about how, like, I think teachers are constricted to, like, not teach critical pedagogy?
Yeah, I mean, well, because this is a practice, this is something that seeps in through curriculum, and I don't know, I agree with you, Eric. I think it's hard given all of these standards that we have, but I think that's where the term agency comes into place. If you don't send your kids to school on the day that they're tested, they ain't got kids to test. So like, think about all the different ways that we can organize as communities to tell people and to tell our folks that are in power over our schools of ed, over our departments of ed, in all these different places, I mean school boards and things like that, that like, we're not going to put up with it. We're not going to put up with the boxes that our students are continuously being put in, and the education that they want them to have, just so that they can function within an industrialized or whatever techie community. We don't want all our kids bust into Google. We want our kids being able to understand and like be able to critically analyze the world that they live in.
Yes, exactly. And right now, what you just said about, like, pretty much opting your children, like, during the week of standardized testing, you do not have to send your kids to school. I want everyone listening to this podcast right now to understand that the state, that the districts, they make money for your children sitting down in their seats. That's why kids end up going to court when they ditch too much, or you have to go to court as a parent. So the state wants your kids sitting down, not giving a damn if they fail or get an A, not giving a damn how great their education is. No, they just want their ass in the seat. And so during standardized testing, a lot of parents across this nation now are opting out their kids from standardized testing. They're saying, you know, we're done with our kids being robots with high stakes testing, and we're taking them out. So you as a parent can take your kid out during high stakes testing, a week where they just need to be robots and fill in multiple choice. And hopefully, if enough parents join this movement, check out on Google opting out standardized testing. You'll find a lot of resources there if you choose to opt out your children. And if a lot of parents in this nation end up joining this struggle, they will have to change this. They cannot keep going with these standardized testings, because it's getting the high stakes testings is just ridiculous. The accountability for teachers, for schools in like poor communities that don't do good on standardized tests get no funding. That makes no sense when they have less resources to study for those tests. I see it as it's like a cycle of like keeping poor schools poor. It doesn't make sense to me.
I don't understand how you can expect people to do more with less if they're struggling with these tests. Obviously, they need more resources, not less. If these rich schools in suburbs can do well, why are you going to give them more money to do what they're already doing? It's backwards, and I don't think parents are using their agency and, like you said, opting their kids out, because if they did, it would, you're right, force the system to change. And it's a combined effort, it's a collective effort, and if we don't understand this and start using it to our advantage, then it's not going to change.
Yeah, definitely. So definitely keeping in mind that parents and students have agency. It is the law to go to school, but if students and teachers and parents get together, they can make a lot of difference. All of them together, all their power together. And this is something like that goes with critical pedagogy, because it's understanding why do we need to be in the seats? Why do we need to standardized test them? Who's making all this money off of standardized testing? Somebody is profiting. Let's question that. Let's understand that. So I want to take it back to the topic of women and girls. How can like critical pedagogy help young women in the classroom and out of the classroom? Does anybody have any things to say about how critical pedagogy can be taught in a way that can empower young girls?
Yeah, I was a literacy teacher, tutor, what have you, for 4 years with the Santa Fe Springs City Library. And we had a program called ELLI, which is an English Language Learning Intensive, and we would go visit schools that had students that were either ESL or like struggling with English as, like 2 different languages in the house and stuff like that. So I would take in particular books, picture books with stuff that would empower the girls in my classroom, because a lot of the times most of the books were for boys, right? Like that's the gender neutral. Is like if they're a boy, if it's a boy book, it could go either way. If it's a girl book, it's only geared towards girls.
And what were the names of some of those books and some of those authors?
This book was called, this particular book I'm thinking of, oh crap, what is it? One of the books was called Mighty Jackie. This is a book about a girl, her name's Jackie something. She's a baseball player during the time of Lou Gehrig and Babe Ruth and stuff. She was one of the greatest pitchers out there. She struck out Babe Ruth and Lou Gehrig in a row, and up until this point, people were thinking that she was not going to be able to strike them out or be able to pitch at them. Babe Ruth would make remarks like, a girl can't strike me out, like she can't even pitch, and all of these things. And so I would discuss with my students, what roles do they find with comparing boys and girls and sports, and when boys are compared to girls, and like you throw like a girl, and like what does that mean? And so we would have discussion. I would have a discussion with 4th and 5th graders about how they see girls and how to empower girls, and how our society actually like tells boys to not want to be like a girl. And then I had one particular girl about my first year teaching. And she said she wanted to be a baseball player and work in the MLB, and some boys like, no, you can't do that. And I was like, yo, dude, there used to not be a WNBA, and now there is, and you can make things change. And one day you're going to see this girl, she's going to be an all-star, and you're going to be like sitting on your couch, watching her from your TV, and you're going to be sad that we ever had this conversation in 3rd grade. So, like, you have to take agency as a teacher, even though I was just in their classroom for an hour each week, like, I tried to have these conversations with these students and make them creatively write about that as well.
Interesting, interesting. I like how you managed to like teach these fourth and fifth graders about like gender boxes, like how like you cannot you throw like a girl. What is that? What box does that put a girl in? Like a young girl, that she's weak, that she's not athletic, that she's puny. So it puts her in that gender box. If you don't throw the girl, then you're in the other gender box. You're the man. Like you're strong, you're athletic, you're tough, blah blah blah. So how else can critical pedagogy like empower Southeast LA communities? Southeast LA is, again, I'll repeat it, Huntington Park, the city of Bell Gardens, Cudahy, Maywood, Southgate, and there's a bunch of other cities, but right now, as a collective, we're only counting these cities because we have actual people representing these cities. So how can critical pedagogy empower Southeast LA communities? Does anyone have anything to say about that? How can teaching children in these communities help them to make change in these communities through critical pedagogy?
I think one of the things that we can do in our communities is opt out, and not just opt out and let those kids hang out at at home just watching TV or whatever, but use that as a critical pedagogy week, as an intensive week. And this is why we need more spaces like Alivio and more community-centered spaces, because if there was an offered course for that week where kids could be opted out from school and sent to a community center or a safe monitored place and taught not just what to think but how to think, and even if they just started out with a discussion on standardized testing, and as the students going through this, what do you think about these tests? Do you think testing helps you?
Yeah.
Do you think it makes a difference? Do you think it's actually measuring your intelligence? Do you think this is going to help you get into college? Do you think this is going to help you find a job? Do you think this is going to help you at all? And helping people, see things from these different perspectives could send them back to school with an entirely different outlook.
That is, could we say, quote unquote, super radical? Like, imagine, as a future educator, imagine I would do that in a classroom. I think the principal would be up my ass so quick. Like, if I would talk to kids like that, like, whoa, that sucks. So, but it's extremely bureaucratic, and that is a system that I'm gonna have to be working in the future.
And the problem, even on top of that, is as an educator, you're working to educate these kids, but that standardized test doesn't really do that, and it's not even like it furthers their education, because just because they can pass these standardized tests and the Casey and the exit exams and get through high school, they go to college, if they're lucky enough to get there, completely unprepared, because they've been taught to a test and they haven't been taught how to write critically and how to think critically and how to analyze information and how to actually learn anything. They've just been taught to memorize for the past 12 years.
Definitely. That'd be amazing if we could somehow do that. I think that's how we could change these communities, empowering the young people. Like at Alivio yesterday, there was some like little young girls. Like, imagine those little girls like that went on the stage. Like that little girl that took her art up there. That was my favorite part of the night. Like, imagine how like empowered she feels, and she don't even know what the word empower means. Like, she was 9 years old and she had her art, and just teaching kids that they matter, and that like, what is this girl thinking right now? She's 9 years old in a garage with like 50 people. Why do we need to be in a garage? If you can make this child understand, like, we need to be in this garage because these cities, mija, they don't have spaces that are safe. They don't have spaces that are different from liquor stores and closed down businesses tagged up. If you can make these kids understand why these things exist and how undervalued some of these cities are, that builds up like young minds to want to make a difference. If you can make them understand those things.
Definitely. I think something that always comes to mind is a piece by Jeff Duncan Andrade, where he talks about every student being indigenous to that classroom space. And so when you think about how I would hear of students who would often tell me like, Miss, like I keep getting kicked out of my classroom, or a bunch of kids talking about that they're never allowed in because of the way that they quote unquote behave. If you really view students, no matter what is happening at home, what is happening internally, what is happening in society, but really view them as indigenous to that classroom space, it is theirs. If there is some conflict that's happening, you deal with it in-house. You deal with it in their community. You deal with it with them, not throwing them out to the cops, to the administrators, to different folks that are not going to humanize them more than you are as an educator. So when I think about the power of critical pedagogy, I think of teachers being able to humanize their students. And yeah, there's a lot of stress of the stuff that you're under, but when you think of the kids that you have right in front of you, you have literally children that are just waiting for you to be able to provide them with a space where they can be truly themselves. And believe me, it is such a liberating act as an educator for you to become fully yourself in the presence of students as well.
All right, awesome. Thank you so much, Dorenyse, for those thoughts on critical pedagogy. I think we can definitely empower Southeast LA communities through critical pedagogy. And it's been a great show today. We covered a lot today. I hope you've enjoyed listening. We covered self-love, agency, the way self-love is affected by childhood trauma and media. We also covered Mujerismo, what it is and what it is not. We covered critical pedagogy, and topics we want to touch on in the future are like LGBTQ issues and definitely representing for the deaf community. We want to touch on topics that have to do with police brutality, knowing your rights, and school to prison pipelines. So if you're interested in any of these podcasts or these topics, please make sure to contact us to either SELACO.
The email is selacollective@gmail.com. SELA collective@gmail.com.
Yes, and if you're interested in anything that has to do with Alivio, please email alivio.openmic@gmail.com. That is ALIVIO.openmic@gmail.com. And just to repeat, Southeast LA Collective is a tree, and Alivio Open Mic is one of the branches under this tree, and SELACO from the Casa podcast is another branch on this tree. Anybody else want to plug in anything?
All right. No, I just want to thank you guys for having me here. And if anyone wants to continue following my artwork or see what I'm into, the Chicana artwork that I'm trying to expose out there, you can follow Araceli. That's ARACELI_SB on Instagram, ESPI. And same thing on Twitter. That is all.
I guess thank you for your time. Thank you for listening. If you do want to know more about me and who I am, Karla Sanchez, you could check out the bands Ronco Bacoco and Mano Sucia.
Dope. I want to go to a show soon. All right, well, I just want to say thank you again. Thank you, Frank, Christian, Araceli, Karla, Dorenyse. It was awesome listening to your thoughts and your words. And now we're going to leave you off with some awesome music by Shneaky. Thank you all.
Blue skies smiling at me, nothing but blue skies do I see.
Drop it.
Blue skies smiling at me, nothing but blue skies do I see. Blue skies smiling at me, nothing but blue skies do I see.
I hold the moon in my hand, sun's on my back, stars all twinkle when I rap. The blue skies reflected off her eyes, 3 stems, 4 caps. I start my day just like that. We wander the forest, before us the trees start to breathe. We're mingling with nature, dancing with the leaves, conversing with blue birds, blue bees, cool breeze, hot sweat, vivid sun rays look wet, water paint just fresh. Sky turns a shade of green with red driplets, clouds go